So you've probably heard of the TNFD, right? And if you have, chances are you've come across the acronym LEAP. But what does it actually mean? Well, that's exactly what we're here to demystify. We're going to break down this four-phase approach that's designed to help any organization, and I mean any organization, get a handle on its relationship with the natural world.
All right, so let's jump right in. What is LEAP? It's a really straightforward acronym for a pretty powerful process. First up, we have L, and that stands for locate. This is your starting point. It's all about figuring out where your business, your operations, your value chains physically intersects with nature. You know, mapping out everything from your factories and farms to where you source your supplies.
Next up, we've got E for evaluate. Okay, so once you know where you're operating, this phase is about digging into the specifics. You're asking two big questions. What does my company depend on from nature? Think about a beverage company that needs clean water, and what are our impacts on those very same ecosystems? Then comes the A, which stands for assess. Now, this is where things get really interesting, because it's where that environmental analysis turns into real business intelligence. You start translating those dependencies and impacts into financial terms, assessing the actual risks and, just as importantly, the potential opportunities for your company.
And finally, we have P for prepare. This is the action phase. It's all about getting ready to respond to everything you've just learned. You prepare new strategies, you beef up your risk management processes, and you get ready to report on those material, nature-related issues to your investors and stakeholders.
So there you have it. That's the LEAP approach in a nutshell. The TNFD created this whole integrated process because everyone, investors, regulators, and even companies themselves, were asking for a clear, consistent way to wrap their heads around nature-related financial risks. It's built to be used by anybody, no matter your size, sector, or where you are in the world.
All right, so here's our game plan for the next few minutes. We're going to cover what LEAP is, its three big guiding principles, take a closer look at those four phases, and, this is the important part, talk about how you actually get started and turn all this assessment into real action.
First things first, let's get really clear on what LEAP actually is, and just as crucially, what it isn't. This is where a lot of people get tripped up, so it's worth spending a moment here.
Okay, this is probably the single most important distinction to make. The LEAP approach, that's an optional internal process. Think of it like the homework your company does behind the scenes to really understand its own situation. The TNFD disclosures, on the other hand, are the public reports you might produce. So LEAP is simply a recommended tool to help you gather the right info for those disclosures. It's a pathway, not a mandate. Super important distinction. Now, before you even think about jumping into the L for locate, the TNFD suggests getting into a certain mindset. It's all built on three guiding principles for how to approach your assessment.
The first principle is just good common sense. Plan ahead. Before you dive into the deep end of analysis, you absolutely have to scope out the assessment. What are you trying to achieve? What's your budget? What's your timeline? Getting these parameters clear from the very beginning is going to save you a ton of time and headaches later on.
Second, this isn't something you're meant to do in a bubble. The TNFT really encourages you to talk to your stakeholders and, when it makes sense, bring in outside experts. You'd be amazed at the insights they can bring, pointing out things your internal team might never have spotted.
And this is a big one. It's so important to remember that LEAP is not this rigid, follow the steps exactly kind of process. The framework calls it an approach with components for a reason. It's designed to be flexible, and that's totally intentional, right? It means any organization can pick it up and adapt it to what they actually do, whether you're a manufacturer or a financial institution.
So now that we've got those guiding principles in mind, let's zoom back in and take a closer look at the heart of the framework, the four phases of LEAP itself.
Looking at the whole thing, you can really see how it all flows together. It kicks off with that initial scoping phase we talked about, then moves through L, E, and P, and ultimately it all feeds into your company's strategy and disclosures. It really is an end-to-end process.
So let's break that journey down. Step 1, you locate where your business touches the natural world. Simple enough. Then you evaluate your dependencies and impacts in those places. Third, you assess the business risks and opportunities that pop up as a result. And finally, you prepare your strategic response and get ready to report.
Okay, this brings us to what might be the most practical question of all. If you're an organization looking at this framework, you're probably wondering, how in the world do we actually get started? So, yeah, where do you begin? Well, the TNFD's answer is crystal clear. You actually start before the L in LEAP. You start with a dedicated scoping phase. Think of scoping as a quick preliminary scan. It's your chance to map out where the big issues might be hiding, and, critically, to get your whole team aligned on the goals and resources before you get lost in the weeds.
And this isn't just some vague planning meeting, okay? The whole point of the scoping phase is to produce something tangible, usually what's called a terms of reference document. As you can see, this thing basically becomes your project charter. It lays out your hypothesis, your timeline, who's on the team, and where you're going to get your data.
All right, let's wrap this up by connecting all this detailed assessment work to what really matters, making actual business decisions.
You've got to remember, LEAP isn't some academic exercise in collecting data for a report that sits on a shelf. The entire purpose is to arm senior management with the insights they need to make smarter decisions about strategy, about risk management, and about where to put their money. This can impact everything from a single business unit to the whole company.
Which brings us right to the end, to the big so what question. Once you've done the work, you've got the data, the analysis is complete, now what? The time for just assessing is over, and the time for action begins. So the real question is, what's the first decision you're going to make?